Yeah, so in 2015, my little family lived in a small country town in Queensland. Unfortunately, my husband passed. It was difficult in the way that people would say, "Oh, your son's lost his dad." Guess what? My daughter lost her dad too. The kids were 13 and 15, and we were supported and well looked after in that little town and by people that knew our story. And in that time and place, I didn't have to explain anything to anyone because they knew. And people were kind and supportive. And what I struggled with was actually moving away from that town and that place, because everyone would say, "Oh, what do you do? What does your husband do?" And I'd be like, "Oh," straight away.
Hey guys, what's up, and welcome to a brand new year in 2025. My name is Tar, and back in 2024, I was the host of the podcast show On the Road with Tar. But now I'm stepping it up to continue on in season 2 with a whole new vibe. Welcome to the Round Table, which symbolizes a safe space for stories to be shared, voices heard, and lessons learned. So pull up a seat and join me on my journey, because each story you get to hear matters. So please take note that we will be covering sensitive topics, and for you or for someone that you know that is in need of support, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14. That number again is 13 11 14. And now, here to kickstart the show is the lovely Amelia Olsen, who is the author of 2 amazing books, The Flower Thief and Dirt and Dust. But I don't want to give away too much, as I would love for you all to stick around to find out more about the hardships of what she's had to go through with the loss of a family member, but also the perspective of how both her children were grieving differently at different age groups. So please stick around to find out more as we get into it. Hey guys, what's up, and welcome back again. It's your man Tar here in the brand new year of 2025, and looking back in 2024 in the first season of On the Road with Tar was an absolute delight and an awesome experience throughout the journey of doing that podcast session. And this year, we're stepping into a whole new vibe. Welcome to the Round Table. But I'm also excited today to have the first guest on the show today, who is the author of 2 amazing books that she's written, but I don't want to give away too much, as she'll get to share some of the insights of her books and her own personal experiences of what she's had to go through in her life. But what the Round Table symbolizes is a space for stories to be shared, voices heard, and lessons learnt. So please pull up a seat and join me on the journey where you get to hear stories that matter. So I've been wanting to say this for the past month. Amelia, welcome to the Round Table.
Thank you so much, Tar. I know we've had a couple of phone conversations before today. Great to finally meet you, and so happy to be here at Woodgate Beach on a beautiful Sunday morning.
Absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to join me too.
My pleasure.
This is pretty amazing. The weather's been a bit iffy. I had a little bit of drizzle, but hey, that's all part of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
But so before we kind of dive into everything, can you just, for the listeners and the viewers that may not know who you are, just share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. So my name's Amelia. First of all, I like to introduce myself as a mum, because I'm the mother of 2 fabulous young adults. Riley just turned 25 and my daughter Jacinta is 23. So that's always my first identifier, is mum. After that, I would probably say I'm a school teacher. I became a small school teaching principal a couple of years ago. I'm on leave from that at the moment to finish a PhD. And in between all of that, I've written a few magazine articles, a couple of books, and I suppose we survived a suicide in our family. So that's been a big motivator for, I suppose, lots of things. Came up with a concept called adventure therapy. Definitely want to write about that in the future. But at the moment, just mostly prioritising the PhD and I suppose sharing our story to help other people. Yep.
Now, can you kind of take us back to where it all began before taking on a mammoth journey that you did with your son Riley?
Yeah, so in 2015, my little family lived in a small country town in Queensland. Unfortunately, my husband passed by suicide, and that little country town loved and looked after us in our recovery. So I suppose as a bit of a give back, I jumped into a couple of things, and one was my PhD, and that was about improving outcomes for people in rural, regional, remote schools. So that was my professional contribution, to the people in those kinds of communities, because if you're in another location, somebody could die 4 doors down and no one would even know. But in a small country town, everyone knows everything about everyone, and we were truly looked after. So I suppose that was part of my motivation for my PhD. In 2018, Riley and I decided to carry out the last family bucket list item, which was a motorbike ride from Cairns to Cape York. Clearly, we'd planned that as a family. My husband didn't make it that time. So Riley and I embarked on the journey, and I think I fell off that motorbike 14 times in 1,400 kilometres. And so that was in 2018 when he turned 18. And by 2021, we'd actually written the book of Dirt and Dust. And the book was actually written 3 times. The first time was just me dumping stuff. That was therapy for me. I was angry, I was sad, I was every emotion under the sun. And I read it back and I thought, this is terrible, no one could read that. And then the second time I wrote it, I had actually spoken to a lady who coaches writing at a university, and I said to her, I don't know how to pull this together so that it could possibly be readable for somebody else, that you know, I'd been asked, can you write down your pearls of wisdom? What have you learnt in this grief and loss and suicide recovery process? And I thought, I don't really know. So the second time I wrote the book, with the guidance of that lady, she said to me, how about you write the book on the 7-day ride? And I thought, yes, then I know how to actually finish it. And I read it back and I thought, I sound like the whinging widow, the wife, the school teacher. There's too many lessons in this book. And I thought, that's just like nails down a blackboard. And at that time, my son had moved out to the desert. So he was in the middle of the Tanami. And he was working on a property, and he was the only person there for about 3 weeks over Christmas. And I was a bit worried about him as mum, and he's on 1.76 million acres in the middle of nowhere. Somewhere out on the Northern Territory West Australian border. You know, he was a boy that had lost his dad. He'd also lost his boss in a workplace grief and loss situation there. So my son had a whole lot of trauma. And so I said to him, can you please read this book and let me know what's missing? This is our story. This is your story. And he said, Mum, I don't want to read it. And I said, I understand. And then me not giving up, I said, how about I read it to you? And so we agreed that every afternoon when he'd finished his work on the station, I'd FaceTime him and I'd read him a chapter of the book. And we translated the book, instead of me being the narrator, to him being the narrator. And a few people have said to me, that would have been a great bonding opportunity between you and your son. And I said, hey, I gave birth to him. I didn't need to bond anymore. We're pretty tight. We're pretty close. But what it did do was it actually made the story a bit funny, because I was hopeless on that motorbike ride, and he could take the piss out of his mum. And therefore I thought, you know what, this actually makes it better for an audience of possibly young men or other people, because it's coming from 18-year-old Riley perspective, and he was really grappling with that growing into a young man without his dad, and the choice that his dad had made in regard to us and his life and our family, and I was struggling with the physical aspects of trying to ride, and I didn't know whether my son was helping me or I was helping my son. And it was a massive growth journey, but then writing the book was also a growth journey, because it brought up things that we hadn't actually talked about. We just hadn't actually talked about a lot of stuff. And so when I had to be really careful, I didn't want to put words into his mouth. And if you read the book, you'll notice towards the end, the heavy lifting conversations are a lot of my dialogue, because I didn't want either of my children to ever be questioned or have to explain anything, So at the start of the book, there's a lot of Riley, going through his emotions and thinking through things and reflecting. And towards the end, there's more dialogue that's me, and that's deliberate because that's my responsibility. I was the adult, I was the wife, I was the mum. Yeah, so that explains that. And to be honest, I didn't know how to finish the book until I was actually writing the end. And when I was writing the end, I thought, what do I want my kids to know and understand out of this situation that's happened with their dad, and what would also help other people? And I'm happy to share the end of the book. But at the end of the book, Riley says, it's not that Dad didn't choose me or Mum or my sister. Dad didn't choose life, because I didn't want my kids to ever shoulder that responsibility of their dad's choice. And there's a lot of stuff that led me to that process to be able to say that and actually comprehend that. And I just don't want other people to feel that blame or that responsibility. It is a person's choice. It's taken a lot of work for me to get to that point of acceptance, and even now I struggle with that. But yeah, for the purpose of ending the book and it being peace for my children and my family and our story, and we do all have to survive, the rest of us have to survive after that suicide. That was the kindest, gentlest, most positive way I could come up with how I was going to put that all together. Yeah.
Was it also during the ride that it kind of gave you a sense of peace and clarity after it, or was it something that you were still battling with throughout the journey?
I think closure is a false expectation. I really do, because I think initially we went on that ride to honour the promise, finish the family bucket list item. I'd committed to that a long time ago. That was a carrot that I sort of waved in front of my husband saying, come on, we've got good things to look forward to. We're going to do this, eyes on the prize, all that sort of stuff. That's me. And so we didn't deliberately, the kids and I didn't deliberately finish the items on the bucket list one by one, but one by one they came up, and it was sort of like, it's presented an opportunity, let's do that thing. And so the last thing was, and the biggest thing was, the motorbike ride from Cairns to Cape York, and I wasn't sure if I could do it. I could ride a motorbike, putt. We had motorbikes on the farm. I rode a motorbike as a kid, but, Cape York is the last frontier. People plan for years to do that trip because it's massive, and I was basically a beginner. I'd given up training about 6 weeks before the ride because I'd had a couple of busters, and I thought, man, if I keep training, I'm going to hurt myself and I'll never make it, so I'm just going to have to wing it. So I did. I just had to grit my teeth and go, and the people on the ride, they really supported me, and I'm going to take my hat off to a whole bunch of men right now, because I couldn't have done that ride if I wasn't well supported by literally 10 other men. And at the end of the ride, flying back from the Cape to Brisbane, one of the fellas on the trip, and his name's Ratty in the book, he is a rap ag, he said to me, Amy, is it okay if I sit next to you on the plane? And I said, yeah mate, that's fine. And we're flying back, and he says to me, he said, I've been on a few of these rides, and he said, you're an unusual woman in the way that you're not trying to compete with the men, you're not trying to be the best. Or I said, no, I knew I couldn't do this without you. I couldn't. And I said, I knew I was going to be bloody hopeless. I knew I was going to be the last one in every day. I knew I was going to need someone to help me pick up my bike. I said, I had to accept help, and that's something that I actually struggle to do. So I knew I was like, I'm the bottom. It's okay. I'm happy with that. I know where I am in the pecking order. Help, and I think also that later I realised it probably presented an opportunity for those men to feel, I don't know, helpful or useful or kind. Because they would double back and come and help me. They would wait for me at the water crossing, and they'd be like, this way, mate, don't go there, put it in second, just hold grit your teeth and floor it, girlfriend, and yeah, but that just made my hair stand up, because it was just such a true and real experience, and I knew I had to accept help. There was no way I could do it without them. So yeah, it was massive, and the celebration at the top of the country, and it was epic. And I think that's where I hatched this idea about adventure therapy, because did I know I could do that ride before I did it? No. Did I know I could write a book about it? No. Did I know I was going to survive any of that stuff? No, but I did. And I think that's that whole thing about you can't know the answer before you've actually been through the struggle. And yeah, I suppose in a way it's like pick your mountain and just get started. that is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to circle back when you were talking about how it took you a while to get to a place where you were comfortable to talk about it.
Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through some of the things that you had to do to get to a point at being comfortable talking about it?
Look, it's been nearly 10 years since my husband died. That was 2015. There's a whole lot of acknowledgement there. The kids were 13 and 15, and we were supported and well looked after in that little town and by people that knew our story. And in that time and place, I didn't have to explain anything to anyone because they knew. And people were kind and supportive. And what I struggled with was actually moving away from that town and that place, or if I was outside of that bubble of people that knew. And I'm going to say this, but I created a bit of a cover story. And the cover story was because everyone would say, oh, what do you do? What does your husband do? And I'd be like, oh, straight away. I'd think, oh, man, how do I answer that? So I spent a lot of time actually not going anywhere. I hid under a rock. And it became a bit of a joke because we lived on Cave Street, and I said I live under my rock on Cave Street, and I really struggled with it. So I had to actually rehearse a bit of a story. And when I started the PhD, and I ended up buying a motorbike after the Cape York trip, I had positive things to talk about other than my personal circumstance, because what I didn't like when I met new people, straight away you'd get the pity thing. It would be like, they'd say, oh, what do your husband do? What do you do? What does your husband do? Blah, blah, blah. And I'd go, oh, as soon as I say something about that, yeah, your heart just sinks, and then people don't know what to say to you. So I was like, oh, my name's Amelia, I'm a school teacher, and I'm working on a PhD. That was my kind of cover story, because I just didn't want to delve into that sad stuff because it stops conversations. And then from there, I realised how many times in my life they weren't necessarily big adventures, but when I felt that heartbreak or that struggle or that kick in the guts, I'd think, what am I going to do about it? Yeah, literally, I'd go and climb mountains. I would hop on that motorbike, and I'd just come back from a 15,000 kilometre trip around the country. It's like, I just got to do something with that. I got tired of being sad. And
Would you say that was a way for you to escape?
I actually don't think it is a way to escape. Some people are avoidant and they need to escape. I'd done enough isolation to realise what I needed to do. What I needed to do was to replace the sad stuff with somewhere to put that energy and that effort. And so therefore, that was part of the PhD as well, because I was like, okay, where am I going to put my energy and my effort? How can this be productive? How can this go forward? I was isolating. I was kind of hiding a little bit from the world because of those social interactions. And then you get to this point where you go, okay, I've got something else to talk about other than my personal circumstance. And then I was kind of okay about it. And enough time had passed by then as well. So, yeah, it was about putting your hurt somewhere other than being sad. Pick a mountain, start climbing. Yeah.
Now, for someone that's possibly going through maybe a similar experience, and again, sorry about the loss of your husband, someone that's going through a similar situation with a loss through the same circumstances, how are you able to cope with all the pain, the emotions that you had to deal with?
I think for everybody that's going to be different. For me, I'd prioritise just being a mum and getting on with things after a period of time. I think something that I noticed that people sort of forget or they don't realise is that in that initial 3 months, a lot of people care about you and they check and, they can see your grief and emotion and they're asking you, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? After that 3 months, there's kind of a bit of a flat spot and you're getting used to your new normal and other people don't know what that is yet. That's really the sad heavy lifting stuff, because you're still waiting for that person to come home from work or, that sort of stuff, it's, yeah, or for me, the reason why I decided to get my motorbike license was because it was Sunday morning. So I was like, normally we'd be having a coffee and we'd be cooking egg and bacon and we'd be having the family chat around the table or whatever, or going out for a walk or something. And it was like, yeah, so that was tough. And then other people come and go from your life. I was really fortunate to be a school teacher, and a lot of my friends are either guidance officers or social workers or in that mental health field. So I was surrounded by a lot of people that are emotionally really aware and have strategies, and they were kind and understood that grief and loss process, and a lot of them had had something similar happen in their life, so they could anticipate where I was at or where my kids might be at. Some, you know, there's other things too about physical activity, and I've always been a physically active person. I've never been a gym goer or anything like that, but you know, watching families here this morning at Woodgate, you know, swimming, walking the dog, that's always been my life. I've never been hardcore anything, but I've always been active. So I suppose I tried to stay in that routine of active, and sometimes the loss was massive because I was like missing that or missing that other person in that, but I had to keep going. Then years later, there was something else that happened in my life, and I felt the loss all over again, and that was harder because it was like a second loss. It was that was absolute heartbreak, because I thought, oh no, you know, I felt like I was grieving double then. And so when other people have been clinically depressed, I couldn't understand that before, how they couldn't get out of bed, or they couldn't actually get dressed or brush their teeth or whatever. I could never understand that. But it wasn't until I had that second hurt that I thought, oh my goodness, this is what those people see or feel or believe, you know. And I thought, wow, there's the struggle spot. So for me, that was, I think the second hurt was harder because I knew I had to recover from that.
I suppose from a female's perspective, it's completely different to a male's perspective. And in the book, Dirt and Dust, hearing the story from, and even seeing it from your son's eyes, was funny, sad, emotional. There was moments of anger there too, which I could understand. And it was also the lessons that he was learning along the way with the journey from the guys that were
Absolutely
part of the tour. It was like, wow, that was so amazing. So in the process of him experiencing the journey, he was also grieving as well, differently. There's also a moment in there where you talk about your daughter. How was she coping with it too? Hey guys, thanks again for tuning back in. And if you're finding value in today's show, please subscribe and hit that bell button so you can keep up to date with each episode. So let's get back to it.
Thank you so much for asking, because she's kind of the silent partner in all of this. And to be honest, I think the loss of her dad hit her so much harder. She was Dad's girl. And it was difficult in the way that people would say, oh, you know, your son's lost his dad. Guess what? My daughter lost her dad too. And there's often a connection between dads and daughters, and she doesn't talk a lot about it, but I really feel for her in the way that, yep, she's got her mum, but she lost her dad. And, you know, there should actually be no gender bias in any of that, as far as I'm concerned. You lose a parent, you lose a parent. She, you know, she's a beautiful, funny young lady. She's strong-willed like her dad. She has a bit of a my way or the highway attitude, and I think that's actually going to be her survival. At different times, you know, we just had Christmas, and I thought, you know, even if my husband and I weren't still married, she's, particularly her, still needed her dad, in the way that if she wanted to whinge about mum, she can go to dad. Who does she whinge to mum about? You know, like, I expect that. You're a parent. Kids aren't always going to agree with you, and they need the other parent to go to. You know, no one would know me like my husband does, you know, things like that. So yeah, it's been tough for her. I actually worry a little bit too about relationships into the future, because, you know, they have had that, both my kids have had that big loss. I know they're really quite well balanced considering what's happened in our life. But in terms of that modelling of how to negotiate and cooperate and all of that stuff, that's a worry. And I think often people miss the part about they are modelling to their children, even when their children are young adults. They're modelling to their children the type of human you want them to be, how to resolve conflict, how to make things okay. And, you know, withdrawing or disappearing or ending your life is not the answer for your kids. and I suppose that was my anger about my husband's suicide at the time, because I thought, oh, come on, man, like, you've got 2 kids. I thought we had the best circumstance on the face of the earth, I knew and valued what we had when we had it, and all that other stuff was just minor, low-level crap, like, and I said to my son, over Christmas, when everything was quiet and everyone else had gone home, and we had a few conversations about his dad and our relationship and things like that, and I said, can I fact check some things with you? And he's like, sure, Mum. And I said, in my heart and mind and in my memory, I only remember having probably 3 stand-up arguments with your dad, like 3 rah arguments. And he goes, yep, that's about it. And I said, I'm so glad you said that, because I don't want people to imagine that my marriage was terrible, or this was some huge bad circumstance. I couldn't have stayed married to the man if it was terrible. I couldn't have stayed married to the man if I didn't love him. Why did I stay in that? Because I loved and believed and hoped that things would get better. And I married the man. I took a vow to stand by him. And in the end, I did have to put up a bit of a boundary and say, hey, look, you can't keep up with this behaviour. You need to help yourself now. And for me, that didn't mean the end of our marriage. It meant he now had to actually do something different. It was getting difficult. And I suppose that's the part where people either decide, I'm going to get the help and I'm going to make things better, or I'm going to go. And he chose to go. And that brought a whole lot of anxiety. I am a highly anxious person, probably because of a lot of that stuff. But I identify that in other people really quickly too. And for me, in my recovery, it's been about me trying to get that anxiety down, or if things don't go right, I have to realise that not everyone's going to kill themselves. Like, I know I'm a runner and a saver. I absolutely know that. And I'll do whatever I can, however I can. But I've had to learn, probably in this last 12 months, I can't save everybody. I will help, and I'll get you to the bottom of the stairs, and then it's up to you to take that first step, because I just can't be responsible for that, whereas I have felt responsible for that. And I know I have a huge level of effort and compassion, and there's no wrong answers as far as I'm concerned, but I have had to, in the last 12 months, probably do some self-preservation mechanisms. And some of that has been isolation, some of that has been therapy, some of that has been, just working through things or getting it on a scale. How much is this my responsibility? How much can I actually do about that? That person is still going to choose what they're going to choose. So in terms of me and my recovery, that's probably been the biggest part. Yeah, yep.
So have there been moments where that every now and then you get flashbacks?
100%. A lot. Absolutely a lot. Yeah. Not, at the start, yes, a lot, because I was trying to think things through, and you actually, when you love and care about someone, you actually walk with them in their trauma. And, I certainly did, because I'm such an empath, and I can see people and I can see their struggle, and I won't abandon them, so I walk with them. And I'll sit with them in the dark, and I'll run with them when they can run, and I'll walk with them when they can walk, and I'll crawl if they have to crawl, like that's just what I kind of do. And yeah, so the flashbacks initially, it was more, when my husband actually died, my mind went back to all of those times that I thought that he might suicide, and I was like, oh, it was like I tricked myself. It was like you'd been in that situation and you saw his behaviour or whatever, and I thought, oh no, it could be now, it could be now, it could be now. I did that for about 15 years. And I started to think, did I imagine that? And then when he actually died, I went into this phase of thinking, oh my goodness, that was real, that was real, that was real. It could have been then, it could have been then, it could have been then. But my saving grace in all of that was, it was terrible, that outcome, but I also felt less crazy, because I was anticipating this loss for such a long time, and I was doing these self-protection mechanisms and crazy stuff, like I wouldn't let the kids go in the house until I did, in case I found him, and things like that. And a long time later I had that conversation with the kids, and they were like, Mum, we knew. And I was like, oh, I thought I'd protected you from that. And kids know everything, even if you don't tell them, and even if they don't see, they know. And my biggest fear was my kids finding their dad. So when he took his own life and it was away from us, I was so grateful to the police and that welfare check, and I sent them flowers to the police station, because I went, phew, Thank you so much. My children did not find their dad. That was the hardest thing for me, but it was relief as well because they didn't have to live with that. And so when I told the kids about their dad, I just told them very factual information, the stuff that I knew, because I said to them, I don't want there to be any secrets. You're 13 and 15, and I don't want you to imagine any missing parts, because I think that's the stuff where your imagination goes crazy. Don't imagine this to be worse than it is, because it's not. And that was that. And, I've done some therapy with probably 3 or 4, probably 5 actually, different counsellors in that 10 years. And the first counsellor, she just said to me, Amelia, you've done all the right things, because they won't be wondering now. You were honest and straight up, and as soon as you could tell them, you told them. So yeah, there was no delay, there was no wondering. And I think for other people in that situation, particularly when you're dealing with children, yeah, facts. Okay, 10 years later, there was some more stuff that I needed to tell my kids, but they didn't need to know that when they were 13 and 15, but they could know that when they were, say, 21 and 23. And that was just stuff between their dad and I that I never intended to tell anybody. But, when there was a bit of silent resentment, I suppose, from my daughter, and she was just missing her dad and questioning all of that stuff, I revealed that information to her, and it changed her perspective of me as mum, for the better. So I think sometimes there's timely information that children need. I couldn't have told her that stuff when she was 13. That would be unfair. Yeah, so, over time, that was that, and I didn't feel like I was holding any secrets, and I think that's why my relationship with my kids is so good, and why they're as balanced as they are, and been able to get on with their own lives. Also because they had one solid, consistent parent, and I didn't prioritise anyone or anything over them. When their dad died, I was like, let's just be us 3, and let's us have a good time and a solid time together, and that's it. So I wasn't chasing a career or anything else in that time. They were it, until they left home. Yeah, admittedly, after when they left home, I fell in a bit of a hole, because my whole life had been, making sure my kids were safe and getting on with life, and making sure that they were fulfilled, and then I had to just trust that they had enough love and skills and understanding of the world that they'd be okay. Everyone goes like this, everyone has their up and down. I do, they do, but and honestly, we've just had Christmas, and both my kids and my mum came for Christmas, and it was a beautiful few days. And to check in with my kids when they both live in Western Australia, and to see them as young adults and listening to their ability to rationalise things or work through things, you really feel it. And you think, oh my goodness, yeah, not just me, but we've done a good job. Me, my husband as their dad, they have work ethic and things like that he had, never missed a day at work. My kids are like that, and I'm so proud. I'm so damn proud of that. But also, it takes a whole village to raise children, and that's what happened to me and my kids in that little country town. So grateful. And like I said, it motivated me for the PhD. We wrote Dirt and Dust. My audience for that book were actually 15-year-old boys. They were really naughty 15-year-old boys in my classroom. But I kept thinking, these boys need to know some stuff about life, and maybe a little bit about love and relationships, and reconciliation or rebuilding and things like that, and making good choices. And so that's why I thought it would be great if 18-year-old Riley was the narrator of Dirt and Dust. And then as a result of that, we also wrote the Flower Thief book. And
okay, speaking of,
yeah,
I have those 2 books here. Dirt and Dust.
Beautiful.
And also the
Flower Thief. Yeah, so the Flower Thief, I'll give you a little rundown on that one. The Flower Thief boy was actually in Dirt and Dust, and when I was publishing Dirt and Dust in 2021, unfortunately the boy who is the character in the Flower Thief was actually killed in a car accident. I was devastated, because I thought, how can fate be so cruel? But fate is fate. And yeah, so the Flower Thief boy was actually in Dirt and Dust. I took him out and decided he needed his very own children's picture story book about grief and legendary kindness. So in 2015, when my husband passed away, I was teaching a bunch of year 6 and 7 students that little boy was 11, and he would sneak into my class every day and leave a flower on my desk. I didn't know who it was that was leaving the flower. It could have been the cleaner, it could have been another teacher, I don't know. And I'd say to the kids while I was marking the roll, you know, thank you to the flower thief, whoever you are, you make my day every day. And so the kids would all laugh because they all knew who it was and I didn't. And then, about 3 months later, he ran into my classroom in the morning and he was like, oh my God, miss, this lady chased me down the road and she told me to stop picking the flowers out of her garden and she's going to tell my dad. And, and I was like, oh my God, it's you. And then he ran outside and he sort of hid around the corner and he was going to cry. And I was just amazed that it was this particular little boy. And so, he never bought any more flowers after that, but the other kids copycatted that for about 2 years. And so that, that kindness, that such small stuff, every day, they just didn't want to see me sad. So in the book, I got the opportunity to describe grief and the emotions and some strategies to deal, and then the beautiful story about the kindness. So that's, they're both actually legacy books, but this one in particular is probably an education tool as well, or valuable for people that don't have the language or don't have a story to hang that, sharing on, so that's why I did that. And so happy with the illustrations in The Flower Thief. When I was a teaching principal, the teacher aide in my classroom, Mary Allen, she drew some beautiful pictures on the whiteboard one day for the kids, and I went, oh my goodness, I think I've just found the illustrator for this book. And Mary has really brought the book to life, and just so beautiful and gentle and subtle illustrations. So Mary's amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's an amazing book too. I've read it a couple times, but I also read Dirt and Dust. However, before we continue on, what's the ultimate goal that you have set for this year in 2025?
Ooh, this is really interesting because goal setting, I've always been a fairly driven kind of person, and the goals kind of fall into different categories. So, and I was just saying this to my daughter the other day. She did up like a 2025 vision board, and she sent me a photo of it because she lives in Perth, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I also realised in my life, like, I have education goals, I have physical goals, I have sort of like hobby goals, things like that. So when I look at 2025, I'll go back to 2024. 2024, I took leave from my work as a teaching principal in about March. I needed some recovery time. My cup was empty. It was a massive job. You're doing two jobs. You're a teacher and a principal. In my personal circumstance, I was struggling a bit too. And I thought, you know what, I just need some time out. But in that time out, I also had things to look forward to. We finished the Flower Thief book, and we actually got that one off my desk, so that was awesome. And I had the PhD to work on. As well as that, I did that 15,000 kilometre trip around Australia on the motorbike. So that was epic, and that was for the Black Dog Mental Health Charity. I met some awesome people on that trip. Friendships going forward, that's epic. Cannot wait. So I suppose in 2024, I had some education goals. I had some personal goals, and that was the writing. I actually wrote a whole heap of magazine articles and had photos and things published in magazines, which was epic. That was like a hobby turned into kind of like, I don't know, something really creative and cool. So I did that as well. And then the motorbike ride, that was kind of like my adventure therapy. And then my family came home for Christmas. So I know I took leave from my work because I was in a tough place, but my year turned out amazing. And on that motorbike ride, I did. I met some incredible people, and they'll be in my life forever. So I think sometimes when I was saying about living under my rock, I really sort of, by about September, I had to stick my head up and look around, because otherwise that isolation becomes too comfortable. And I am a bit of a workaholic, so I needed to put the stuff down and go and do the adventure. And then, and I've come back from that adventure, and my whole psychology is different, so that's that. So 2025, my job is to finish this PhD, get that off my list, and I can't actually tell you some of the other stuff because it's way too exciting.
Okay, we'll have to save it for another episode.
Absolutely. Ask me this time next year, and I can probably share.
Nice. Okay, then now's an opportunity for any final thoughts about your whole personal journey, what you've experienced with your loss, with your children, and with the books that you've written, which I would highly recommend everyone to get. Any advice that you could possibly, you know, share with someone that's possibly going through the same situation or a similar situation?
Uh, I suppose I had this conversation with my mum yesterday. You know, in the nearly 10 years since my husband passed, I think I've had sort of 4 or 5 different episodes of therapy, and they were all different at different times. The first one was about the breakdown of my marriage. The second one was about recovery after the suicide. The third one was about just emotional anxiety with circumstances at that time. And then the next one was more about relationships, and it was past, present, future. And I had to be ready for each of those therapies at that time. And I'm going to say this, but some of the therapists were great and suitable, and others I sort of went, what am I doing here? So in terms of advice for other people getting help for themselves, I'm really fortunate in the way that I have got that circle of people around me that are highly emotionally, educationally informed. So I'm really lucky that my personal circle is like that, but I also didn't want to lean on my friends, for therapy. So I think sometimes that external person that doesn't know all of your circumstances is valuable, and they can be a bit more hard-hitting than your friends or your family. So I'd say seek out the therapy. The first therapist you see might not be the one that's the right one for you, and I've seen 4 or 5 in 10 years, and they've all given me something different. So if people need help, don't be afraid of that. And also I think people need to know they kind of have to tell their story when they're in a good place, because when you hit that tough spot, sometimes it's all too hard, and you do want to avoid, or you do want to isolate, or you can't actually talk about it. It's too hard. So tell your story when you're in a good place. So when you hit that shitty spot, you can ring that therapist or that counsellor or whoever and just go, oh, this just happened, and one of the therapists I spoke to, she said to me, Amelia, we just have to learn to get your tears down right now, and I'm going to help you with some breathing exercises and things like that. That was probably the most useful for me. So don't be afraid of the therapy. The first therapist you see might not be the right one for you. But also, I know in that first loss in my life, I stuck to my routine of exercise and food and just trying to keep all of those things on track. In the second sort of relationship loss, I hit the skids big time. I went to work every day, I put my brave face on, I could decompartmentalize, I could do whatever was in front of me. I'd go home and I'd crash. And so I think also understanding grief and loss, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a death. That was tough, but coming through the other side of that actually took my circle of 6 people that check in with me. So sometimes you're the person that needs the help, and sometimes you're the person that has to give the help. So just understand that goes both ways. In terms of my children, I sort of watch them like a hawk, but I also have to open my hand and let them be who they need to be. And I also have to trust in the parenting that they've had, that they need to be their own person. If I helicopter them, or I, check in too much, or I need them for my support mechanism, that's not right. Both of them live in Western Australia. They're independent young people. They're getting on with their lives, and I'm so damn proud of that. And I know we're as solid as anything. We're as solid as a rock, because they know I love and care about them. They know they're my priority. But I also know that they need a level of freedom, and they also needed to get away from the grief and the sorrow for themselves. And I said to both of them when they left home, I just want you to have love and adventure. Worry about the rest of that stuff after you're 25 or 30, because I think sometimes if all of life's responsibilities get too hard and too heavy, you make a choice like your dad did. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to have experiences and love and adventure, to be able to attach happiness and joy and hope and creativity and fun, and none of that stuff comes cheap, but they've got to be soul kind of experiences so that you value everything. And that's been massive. And I didn't have the answers. I couldn't summarize that 10 years ago, but in this 10 years I've been able to I suppose, live that myself and experience that and come through the other side. But yeah, I think sometimes withdrawing and isolating isn't that there's a time and place for that, to be able to recalibrate and redefine how you want to live your life in that time. But then after that, you've actually got to go out and test it. And I'm going out at the moment. I needed that recalibration time in 2024. And when I went on the motorbike ride, I'm going out and I'm testing it now, and I sort of stick my head up and go, ooh, yeah, okay. And then I go, ooh, that hurt. Withdraw again, go again. Just understand that there is that advance and retreat with the grief, with the loss, with life, with boundaries, with everything. So it's not linear. It's absolutely not linear. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely amazing, because now you've been given the opportunity to share insights of your own personal experiences as a mother, as an author, and for everything that you've gone through. Because with your books, there was more about your kids, which is really awesome too. Both amazing books, but it was also amazing to get insights from your story. And I can't wait to hopefully see a book down the track where you won't have to rewrite it 3 times.
Well, the next one's about Mongolia, so I've got that one pretty clear. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool. We'll save that for the next episode, and then we can take it from there. Okay, so before we wrap up, if someone's interested in wanting to contact you, get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Absolutely. So I'm on social media, so on Facebook, on Instagram. I've also got a website, which is simply my name, ameliaolsen.com.au. Yeah, absolutely. I love it when people actually read my books and then they send me a message and they tell me what they got out of it or how it's impacted them. And that's the whole purpose why we wrote the book, because when my kid's dad died, they felt like they were the only person on the face of the earth who had lost their dad to suicide, and it was just a bit of an isolating experience. And I suppose that's what motivated both of the books, really. Sometimes people don't know what to say or do, but they don't actually have to say or do anything. They just have to turn up, and sit like this across the table. And if you have to, just say, oh, Jesus, nice day. Whatever. Just spend the time. You don't have to talk about the thing, sometimes that is all too hard, but just turn up. Don't shy away from it, because it's worse to leave that person in isolation when they're hurting. Literally turn up. Just turn up. And so that's pretty cool. But I love it when people send me the messages and they tell me about how they've made a connection with the book. And I love the fact that reading the book is a personal experience. You get out of it what you need to get out of it, and I love it when people tell me back what part of the book really hit them. I've had quite a lot of men say to me, there was a conversation near the start of the book that Riley had with other men on the motorbike ride, and they said that one hit me hard. Or other parts of the book later, I've had women say to me, oh my goodness, Amelia, you wrote basically a version of my story. I am the mother of that person who's had that suicidal ideation, or I'm the wife, or I'm the sister, I'm the girlfriend. And or I've had other people say to me, I had no idea how much my suicidal tendencies impacted on my family. And I did a lot of checking for a lot of years, and making excuses to go and see if my husband was okay. And when people have said that to me, oh, I had no idea why my mum would turn up and she'd be taking the washing off my line and things like that, I'd be like, what are you doing here, mum? Like, go away kind of thing. And she was doing the check. So sometimes I think it is about holding the mirror up and showing people. Sometimes people they have the capacity to change that, or sometimes they don't, but it's about honesty with yourself. And if you are in a tough spot, get the help you need. Yep, absolutely.
For me, there was a moment in the book, it was near towards the end, where you and Marg, I think, were chilling out in the water, sipping on champagne, I think it was. Riley was sitting behind you guys and overheard, and he kind of talks about how you were sharing your moments of what you experienced with Mark. That was pretty touching. It's pretty sad. So, but I won't give away too much, as I'd love for the listeners and the viewers to get a hold of your book. And I'll also add the details of the description on how they can get a hold of you. And before we wrap up, any final thoughts?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I think that the work that you do about, people telling their stories at this grassroots level is phenomenally important because there's no obligation for anyone to do anything other than have a watch, have a listen and take what they need to take out of it. So I just wanted to say thumbs up to you because it's epic. I love your motivation. It is inspirational. Absolutely happy to help, and I'll cheer from every angle for this kind of grassroots work. So well done you. Thanks.
Amelia, thanks for joining me at the round table.
Absolutely. Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Can I get you to autograph
Sure can.
that?
This will be worth $1 million in
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
2 years.
And we're also going to get you to be the first to autograph the table.
Ah!
So
Can do.